either. Okay. Good morning. Welcome to the May 20th, 2024 meeting of the Federal Secure Cloud Advisory Committee, or FSCAC. My name is Michelle White, and I'm the designated federal officer, or DFO, for this advisory committee. I would like to thank all of our presenters, attendees, and stakeholders for joining us today, including those who provided public comment. Public comments provided via the FSCAC public comment form submitted by Friday, May 10th, have been provided to committee members. Before we start, there are a few things you should know. This meeting is being live streamed and recorded by Zoom. The advisory committee is statutorily required under the James Inhofe National Defense Authorization Act for fiscal year 2023, and thus formally established under the Federal Advisory Committee Act, or FSCAC, as of our charter's official filing date of February 28th, 2023. The committee is considered a federal advisory committee and is governed by the requirements under FSCAC. My role as the DFO is to manage the day-to-day administrative operations of the committee, attend all committee meetings, and ensure that the committee operates in compliance with FSCAC. The duties of this committee include providing advice and recommendations to the GSA administrator, the federal board, and agencies on technical, financial, programmatic, and operational matters regarding the secure adoption of cloud computing products and services. The majority of this work of the committee will be focused around the Federal Authorization Act of 2022 statutory requirements and purpose. Specifically, we will examine the operations of FedRAMP and determine ways that the authorization process can be continuously improved, collect information and feedback on agency compliance with and implementation of FedRAMP requirements, and to serve as a forum that facilitates communication and collaboration among FedRAMP stakeholder community. I will now go ahead and go through a roll call for all committee members. Please let me know if you are present by stating here. Larry Hale.
Here.
Carlton Harris.
Here.
Kayla Underkoffler.
Here.
Josh Kruger.
Here.
Daniel Payne. Marcy Wilma. Here. Bronco Boken.
Here.
Matt Scholl. Bo Burles. Lamont Yarborough.
Here.
Noman Ansari.
Here.
Jackie Snopper.
Here.
Bill Hunt.
Here.
And Joshua Cohen.
Here.
All right, thank you all. Oh, and Michael Burke. Yes, sir.
Here.
And thank you all. It looks like we do have a quorum established, and as some of you may know, we do have one reappointed member, which is Michael, and 3 new members and a new chair. Since we have a few minutes, we'd like each of you to please introduce yourself and your organization to represent. Larry, as our new chair, can we start with you?
Thank you, Michelle. Yeah, I'm Larry Hale. I'm with GSA. I'm the Deputy Assistant Commissioner for the IT category in the Federal Acquisition Service. And I'm excited about being here and taking on this new role.
All right, thanks, Larry. Welcome. And Michael, let's go to you.
Sure. I'm Michael Circa. I'm a senior engineering manager at Google working on regulated cloud, specifically working on compliance. And representing Google and some of the cloud service providers as well.
Fantastic, thank you. And Kayla, let's introduce you next.
Hi, yeah, Kayla Underkoffler, a lead security technologist at HackerOne. And I mostly deal with some of our policy work as well as being a hands-on practitioner for security. So I'm really excited to be involved in this committee, and sad I couldn't be there in person today, but still happy that we have the opportunity to participate virtually.
Welcome, Kayla. We are looking forward to your feedback. And last but not least, Carlton, can you introduce yourself?
Yes, Carlton Harris, Senior Vice President and Growth Officer at End-to-End Enterprise Solutions. We're a small business that operate in GovCon space. So yeah, that's me.
Thanks, Carlton. And thank you all. I will go ahead and now go over the purpose, outcomes, and agenda for today's meeting for everyone to wear out. The purpose of today's meeting is twofold. There it is. I'll just give her a second to get to our agenda.
Yep.
Thank you. All right, fantastic. Thank you. The purpose of the today's meeting is twofold. For the committee to review and vote on the annual report with the GSA administrator by June 14th, 2024. And the second area is for the committee to determine what priorities they would like to work on next with a formal vote to approve them. The outcomes for today are going to be the approval of the annual report to be delivered to Congress and the GSA administrator and a formal agreement on FSCAC's next priorities. Time permitting, the third outcome is agreement on how to move forward with our next priorities. And we have the agenda up online for you to look at, but we will have our welcome and call to order, which we have completed already from 11 to 11:10, and then we'll jump straight into the public comment at 11:20. Then we'll have our chair remarks where we will also vote on the annual report until 11:50, and then we will take our lunch break. And our lunch break is scheduled from 11:50 to 1 p.m. We'll come back and begin deliberations on what the committee wants to focus on next with the vote on their top priorities until 2:55 p.m. And then we will end the day with closing remarks. Any questions? Okay. So a few more housekeeping items before we go into public comment. Please be sure to identify yourself before speaking. So those listening via the webcast or reading the minutes after the meeting will know who made which comment. And for any members attending virtually, please make sure that your microphone is muted anytime you are not speaking. If you are not a committee member, please hold all comments until the public comment period. And please also ensure that your microphone is on mute otherwise. So we are to our public comment area in the agenda. So your comments to our speakers, please note that a timer will be displayed on the screen indicating your time remaining, and an alert will indicate you are out of time. Each speaker is allotted 3 minutes to make their comments. We will be interrupting speakers who exceed 3 minutes, so please speak succinctly and please be respectful of the time. As a reminder, all public comments submitted by Friday, May 10th were presented to the committee members prior to this meeting. And with that, I would first like to call on those who signed up to speak today before opening up the floor to anyone else who would like to speak. The first speaker I have is Hazim El-Dakdoki. Hazim, would you like to take yourself off mute and speak? Okay, we will go ahead and move to the next person who signed up to speak, Fablomi Ojula. Okay, and we do know that Josh Layer is here, so if you'd like to come up, if you could please step close to the owl so that it can recognize you.
Good morning. My name is Josh Blair. I'm part of the FedRAMP team at Red Hat. Here today to offer our insight on what we believe this committee can do to help both CSPs and agencies. Based on the outputs of the March 28th meeting, the top 2 priorities this committee is considering are identifying challenges and proposed solutions around the barrier to entry for small businesses, 3PAOs, and agencies, as well as consider ways to expedite the certification process. It is Red Hat's belief that the best way the FSCAC can deliver on those priorities, with consideration to the FedRAMP board being stood up, is to help deliver timely modernized guidance. FedRAMP guidance is a wonderful way to disseminate specific control interpretation, while also leveling the playing field for individuals and companies new to the FedRAMP space. It is also an authoritative source CSPs, 3PAOs, and agencies can leverage to make design and implementation decisions. Unfortunately, guidance has historically been a rarity. For instance, the authorization boundary guidance has been in the draft phase since July 2021. Given the pace technology is moving, 3 years should be the length between guidance updates, not draft and final. The FSCAC can reduce CSP, 3PO, and agency friction by increasing the speed of guidance delivery and expanding the scope. A number of FedRAMP concepts need to be revised to consider cloud native development environments. Other concepts are simply incredibly outdated, like vulnerability remediation guidelines. Patch everything was fine in the 90s, but even CISA agrees with Bod 2201 that it's time for an update. With the composition of the FSCAC between industry and agency members, while considering how it sits in relation to the FedRAMP board, we believe providing more knowledge to frame discussions for authorizations and ConMon is the best path forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Josh. Our next person who has signed up to speak is Gaurav Pal. Okay. How about Samir Toom? How about Samir Shukla? Robert Joseph? Michael Hancock? And Keith Taylor. All right, that is all of the people that signed up to speak prior to the meeting. I would now ask any public attendees if they would like to speak.
Yeah, I'd like to speak if possible.
Okay, please state your name and
Yep.
we'll start the 3-minute clock.
Thank you. My name's Rob Gill. I represent Okta. We're an identity company and work very closely with agencies across the public sector, as well as DoD. The comment that I wanted to raise, or the issue that I wanted to raise, is specifically around the absolution of the JAB and its replacement. For our FedRAMP moderate offering, we have approximately, I think, 30 agencies and AOs that are participating in it. And as a result, we are essentially forming a multi-agency authorization and determining, committee members and voting and all that kind of stuff, which is basically like creating a JAB. And so I was hoping that the FedRAMP would be able to provide guidance on the post-JAB world and how to organize around that, especially when it's both federal agencies and DoD, and whether multi-agency authorization will now meet the same, will be equivalent to the JAB. And we'd like to get that rolling so that we have consistent messaging to all of our customers. Thank you.
All right, thank you so much. I appreciate that. Is there any other public comments? Okay, well, this will conclude our public comment section for today. Thank you all. Now we are going to jump directly into our agenda's first topic, which is chair remarks. Larry, welcome. As this is this committee's new chair, I would like to invite you to make any remarks you'd like at this time. I'd be happy to answer any FACA related questions should they come up.
Well, good morning, everybody. And thanks for your participation in this committee and in today's meeting of the committee for those who are sitting in as members of the public. First, I appreciate the opportunity to serve as the new chair. I'm not going to read my bio to you. Anybody that wants to look me up on LinkedIn, you can see my bio. I'm a former CISO, and I've been with GSA for more than 15 years and was involved in the early discussions around the creation of the FedRAMP concept. And so I'm really honored and excited to be here to participate with you all in doing what we can to address the concerns around FedRAMP and to improve the processes. So again, appreciate all of you and the knowledge and the expertise that you bring, and I'm excited about the opportunity to collaborate with you. as we move forward on this. That concludes my remarks.
Thank you, Larry. Oh, so we also, are going to do, our review of our annual report. Larry, I'll pass it back to you so that you can, go through the annual report information.
Thank you for that. Yep. Before we jump back into where we left off in the last discussion about the FSCAC's next priorities, we need to talk about the annual report. As many of you know, per the National Defense Authorization Act, Section 3616, we are required to submit a report to the GSA Administrator and Congress summarizing the committee's findings and recommendations. So not later than 540 days after the date of enactment of Section 3616 of the NDAA, and annually thereafter, the committee is required to submit to the GSA Administrator and Congress a report containing such findings, conclusions, and recommendations as have been agreed to by the committee. So as Michelle mentioned earlier, 540 days since the date of enactment would be a due date of June 14th of this year, 2024. All of you have received a draft copy of our annual report on May 3rd and May 14th, which satisfies the requirements as statutorily mandated in the NDAA and provides some background on the work this committee has done this past year. Since we're on a tight timeline for delivery, does anyone have any last-minute requests for changes or modifications to this document before we submit?
Franco says that I just have a question for everyone. My only concern with the report is Appendix A includes the individual comments, which are not attributed and may appear to be as something that's approved by FSCAC in general, while it's not. So how other, I was just curious how others feel about including those comments, and if they're included, whether they need to be attributed.
I concur that it's confusing. I guess we should probably explore what value does including the comments provide, and if we collectively feel that it provides no value, then maybe the answer is not to include them. And if we feel that they do provide some value, then maybe to your point, we can provide some level of attribution.
I understand they're already public as meeting minutes.
They are public.
At least a note, even if not specifically attributed, something general at the top that said, while not attributed, these are individual comments from members of the city.
No,
Might be a balance, if that's possible.
and I will say that it actually does say that it does have a statement at the top of the attachment, because it's an attachment to the memo that was delivered to the GSA administrator. It does state that these are not conducive of agreement of the FSCAC recommendations, that they are just a sum of the various members' recommendation, individual recommendations. So it does state that already. And Darcy's pulling it up. Sorry. So it states Appendix A lists individual comments submitted by FSCAC members and may not reflect the views of all members of the committee.
So as a point of order, then this has already been submitted to the GSA administrator.
Right.
So this is just a motion to submit the same thing to Congress. Okay.
Yes.
Acceptable? Thank you. Thanks for bringing that up. Okay. I'd like to make a motion to approve the annual report as it is currently written. Do I have a second?
Second.
All right, thanks, Larry. I will now go ahead and go through roll call for everyone's vote. Daniel is not here. Michael via Circa. How do you vote? Okay, Alan Carlton Harris, how do you vote?
Aye.
And Kayla Underkoffler, how do you vote?
Aye.
And Josh Kruger?
Aye.
Marcy Wilmette? Aye. Bronco Vulcan?
Aye.
Matt Schul? Bo Burles is also not here. Lamont Yarbo?
Aye.
Naman Ansari.
Aye.
Oh, okay, good. Thank you, Naman. Jackie Snapper
Aye.
and Bill was the second, Joshua Cohen.
Aye.
Alright. Looks like we have the motion to be approved. Thank you all. Larry and FSCAC staff will ensure that this gets delivered on time to the GSA administrator and also to Congress. All right, we are running a little bit ahead of time, but that's no worry. That just means that we have a longer lunch break. So we can go ahead and break until 1 p.m.
Point of order, can we jump into the next set of topics rather than say 30 minutes?
Sure, but I will state that the next set of topics is going to be deliberation on our top priorities. So
We
that
tend to
may
be a very deliberative bunch, so.
that is very true.
Or we could take 1 hour and come back at 12:30.
Fair with that.
All right, let's do that so that we don't have a break, if that's okay. And we'll update the slide so that the folks online can see that we are going to be breaking a slightly different time. But we will be back at 12:30 from our lunch break.
Thank you.
All right, thank you, guys.
That we will have no time to deliberate.
I had to under the train last time, so.
Oh, yeah.
I'm going to the airport after the meeting, so I like the idea of
Yeah.
deliberating and departing.
Wait.
Are there eating options in the building?
No, not really.
Okay.
To be fair, and I will say most of the lunch options are going to be towards the metro. All right, welcome back, everyone. I would now like to invite the committee to begin their deliberations to determine the next priority or priorities that they would like to work on. And if they are ready today to vote on the next priorities. One more note, if the committee cannot decide on what they would like to work on this year, or feels that they need additional presentations or information to proceed, we will still hold a vote today, but the vote could be delayed determining the committee's next priorities until the next steps are achieved. Are there any questions? Great. As always, please remember to restate your name prior to speaking. With that, I will now open the floor for members to deliberate on what they believe is the most important priority that the committee should focus on. Larry, would you like to start us off with your thoughts?
Thanks, Michelle. Thanks, Michelle. As a quick recap, this committee deliberated over a dozen different priorities in the last meeting, ranging from topics such as reviewing ways to lower barriers to entry for small businesses to recommending solutions to AI privacy requirements. The FSCAC staff built a form where we could tally up our top preferences and see which priorities from our discussion rose to the top. And these are the top 3 results of everyone's selections so far, and the number of people who selected them next to it. For those who are interested, the full results are also publicly available and published on our website. Now, based on committee input, 3 priorities clearly rose to the top, and those are identify challenges and propose solutions around the barrier to entry for small businesses, 3PAOs, small and large agencies. Consider ways to expedite the certification process, explore agile authorizations and other potential cost reductions, both labor and financial, and evaluate a minimum risk threshold, minimum acceptability standards for sponsoring agencies. I propose we limit our discussion today to these 3 top priorities. So let's begin our deliberations on these. Does anyone feel that any of these priorities that rose to the top might not actually be a top priority at this time?
I have a question, again, going back to our original recommendation, again, Bronca said that. Did we receive any feedback on our original recommendations?
Yes, a lot of the feedback from the original recommendations, the GSA administrator asked, directed to the veteran program to ensure that the feedback was incorporated into the veteran program. So that has been something that has been incorporated into the veteran program today. Bill, go ahead.
Bill on SEC, following up on that, is there may be a chance that the veteran team might want to be allowed to speak on that topic to know if any of this is superfluous and a waste of our time?
Sure, we can always ask them to speak. We do have a couple of veteran employees here today. We have Dave Wolfmer and Zari Singer. Either of you would like to provide any input?
On these, it might be good for us to hear a little bit of what you all are, and then maybe we add in a little bit, or do you want to jump in now?
Yeah, I think that would be, here's some context of maybe where you're all interested in these topics, but help us maybe provide some direction around what we're focusing on within the program.
My point of contention here was mainly that I don't want to have us spend a lot of time deliberating on how to accelerate these areas. If these are areas you all are already accelerating on, and therefore would be, again, something like, oh, you should go do the thing. Well, yes, we've been doing the thing for 3 months. Thank you for that. Let's appreciate it. Yeah, I just started over with that.
I do think that, like, I mean, we've shared our roadmap with you, so you know, everybody here knows it's a big ask, or we have a lot that we're taking on. So it's not that these aren't on here, but we certainly still want to hear your perspective on them. I think especially number one for small businesses, like their roadmap has items on there. And some of them are prioritized at a later date. So if there's things like earlier or like more near-term recommendations, we'd love to hear some of those. But I think that there's elements of this that are included, but in general, it's would be great to hear what you guys, what you recommend.
Yeah. Very well.
But we'd be happy to talk more about this after there's some conversation. Maybe we can ask the question again at the end. Thank you so much.
I think, Marcy, go ahead.
I withdraw my raised hand.
Okay. Michael, go ahead.
Michael, I just curious on it seems to leave out CSPs. Was that intentional, or it has small business 3,000 and small and large agencies?
I think the intention is that it would be small business CSPs specifically, and then 3POs and small and large agencies.
Yeah, well,
Yes, I do think that the intention was for it to be small business CSPs.
But I'm curious about large business CSPs. Like, is that something we should be adding? Because there's challenges in that space as well.
So I think your question.
So for large business CSPs as well as small business CSP, basically, are we being too limiting in our verbiage here? Should we just change it to CSPs rather than small business?
Bill on SEC again. I think the point of contention was that small businesses are particularly disadvantaged.
Right.
And that's why we narrowed it to scale the last deliberation. Not saying that you all aren't disadvantaged with your trillions of dollars, but we wanted to focus specifically on opening the doors and the barriers.
Yes.
For people who aren't actually already in the door, I think was why it was
Yeah.
raised that way. So although I do appreciate your position,
Yeah.
my contention would be that we really should be focusing on small businesses.
So I agree with that, especially on B, where we're talking about like cost reduction and focusing on cost reduction for CSPs, for small business CSPs. I think if we focus on some of the larger challenges we have for CSPs in general, it'll naturally solve it for small business as well.
Specifically to do with barriers to entry?
Barriers to entry and also just challenges within the execution.
Would a fair compromise perhaps be CSPs with a focus on small business CSPs?
Something like that would
Or
be fine.
or just another?
Yeah, I just don't want,
There's a lot of overlap.
Yeah. I don't want to like tell the PMO, like, don't focus on like a large business just because it makes sense, just because we're focused on small. And like from a barriers to entry, the fish is like, you know, the dissolution of the jab, right, was a barrier to entry for everybody. Something like that is going to impact everybody.
Speeding up the process in general, so
Right.
it's not all CSPs.
Exactly.
Will be
Like,
focused.
yeah, like hit us all fully. Yeah, I think
I would strongly vote to keep the focus in small business. So
would
that should be in there somewhere.
It's also a very prescriptive line item in the like that, so.
And it's been a focus, I think it's like when all he's been here, it's spoken about what they're doing, Congress, small businesses.
so. Yeah, I definitely take that suggestion. Yes. Do we have a motion for updating the language?
Yes, well, we would have to motion for voting. We can deliberate on the language of what we'd want to change here. And Dorothy, can we change that while we're deliberating so that they can actually see it? Sure.
So CSP with the focus on small business. Yes.
Any other comments?
Michelle, Jackie has her hand up remotely.
Michelle, I had a question on C, evaluating the minimum risk threshold. I'm not sure I really understand that because I think a lot of that depends on how a agency is using the cloud provider. And so I don't understand, you know, if I was more stringent, would the cloud provider come back and say, well, the minimum, I meet the minimum, you should be able to accept this. You know, conversely, you know, you may have a sponsoring agency that it's public data. You know, the risk may be lower than that minimum in order for them to use it. So I'm not sure I understand C and what we're hoping to achieve through C.
And if I may follow up, the same concern, if someone could elaborate and explain what was meant there. The more I read it, the less I understand it.
I'll take a stab at this. I don't remember if this was mine, but I said this before, so perhaps I initiated it. Marcy Womack Shulman. In the authorization process, because we see it from all angles, the CSP goes to their sponsoring agency, they get the sponsoring agency ATO, then they go to the federal PMO. They go through an entire additional review at the PMO. The idea is to perhaps what can be reduced, like what if there's a minimum acceptable threshold or standard, or if there's a baseline that happens at each agency, perhaps that reduces a secondary level of review done by the PMO. Because that's what is partially what's drawing out all of the very extended FedRAMP queues that we have that are 6 or 8 months right now. And it just continues to bog down the process.
Does that concern fall under B then?
It could, but I guess is B too broad? I think, and you're not wrong. I think that there are many things that we could all say could roll up underneath these. I guess it just depends on how granular we want to be with the priorities. So.
Thanks. Just to add to what she's saying, tangentially, I think what I'm hearing is from a perspective of reuse, right? You know, that, you know, minimally speaking, these are the things that we've accounted for, appreciating that there may be varying levels of risk tolerance within agencies or throughout agencies. Irrespective of that, there should be some minimum considerations with respect to the fidelity of any package. And I think that's what we should seek to try to kind of codify.
Michael, go ahead.
Yeah, Michael from Google, I definitely agree with that. And also, I think one of the other things that really comes out is with the new FedRAMP board having 7 different vendors on it, having consistency across the board, right? Making sure that packages, that 3 POWs are all understanding the language that all agencies agree across that, and it's not gonna become a game of which agency can we slot this into, and which ones will sign off on things at a lower threshold, or there's others, so that the CSPs don't start running around between different agencies.
That mom pop kind of thing.
Yep.
Right, yeah.
And maybe it's tailoring of the language to focus on the initial authorization or what have you, 'cause I mean, we appreciate, most of the agencies at this table have their own agency specific requirements that we assess for in addition to the FedRAMP, baseline, so it's not to take away from that agency risk tolerance, it's just to accept or to establish a minimum baseline.
So do we need to alter the language here and see?
Open question for this.
Jackie, go ahead.
Thanks, Marcy. I really appreciate that input. Some of this, I think, is not necessarily a threshold, but the processes that an agency has to accomplish in their authorization process and making sure that they're meeting the FedRAMP standards. This goes back to the concept of actually evaluating the agencies to say whether they meet FedRAMP processes, and then they might not have to go through that extended 6 to 9 month evaluation at the FedRAMP board level. So I'm not sure if it's risk or if it's actually process and acceptability standards in the agencies. Over.
Would it? Sorry.
Go ahead, Mike.
Jackie, would it be, if we struck out the minimum risk threshold and we just had minimum acceptability standards for accreditation, would that be, is that sort of where you're going with this?
That's where I am. I don't know where the group is. It concerns me, the risk threshold. And I understand part of the issue may be the fact that the lowering of severities and risks and who does it and those kinds of things. But again, I think some of that is process and acceptability standards as opposed to saying, because we've established a minimum risk threshold essentially by FedRAMP baselines and the organizational values. So I'm just not really sure what minimum risk threshold is, and so the acceptability standards, the process, who can do what, for lowering the, risk, whether it's high, moderate, or low, so the risk threshold is really my concern.
So at the beginning of this deliberation, this is Larry from GSA. At the beginning of the deliberation, we invited the FedRAMP PMO to join in, clarify, and Dave had his hand up. I want to invite Dave up to the Al to contribute.
Yeah, I was actually hoping maybe I could provide a little clarity on like this item C, which is, around this minimum risk threshold. Like in general, what we're trying to do is provide a more consistent approach across all of the authorization paths that the PMO is offering. So we're not trying to necessarily offer a minimum like risk threshold, but more of a standardized methodology that can be applied regardless of the path. And so maybe this group might want to focus on, what that standard should be or recommendations around how to improve that standard. Maybe that's something to consider here. And the other thing to think about too is not just from an initial authorization perspective, but from a continuous monitoring perspective as well. Because we really want to look at this more as an ongoing authorization problem, not just like an initial authorization problem. So how could we apply the standard of practice, both for the initial authorization as well as on an ongoing basis through continuous monitoring? So thank you.
Marcy was one. I wanted to tag on to Jackie's comments about the risk. I mean, yes, the minimum baseline are the 324 better requirements of like, or controls at higher level, but. The reality is you can't come in with findings for 300 of those controls. And we've seen agencies be willing to accept certain findings where it gets to other agencies where the federal PMO and say, no, this is not acceptable. You need to remediate this before we move to the next step of the process. And to Dave, to Dave's point, it's not consistent and it's not defined or documented. And that's also difficult because there's context that's important and all of that, but some sort of framework or something to help mature that process, I think would be helpful. And I guess that's where when I see that risk threshold, that's how I see it, but I realize that might differ across the room.
I think you kind of partly answered, and I'm looking for clarification as the not security person, so I want to make sure I'm understanding the implication, but. So we're not saying the controls within a particular high, medium, low change. It's, if I'm understanding the point you just made. How an agency is going to look at the responses to each one of those controls and make kind of a risk-based decision. Is that what you're kind of talking about? Is like, can we get the agencies to all agree like. This 40% of each of those tiers of reviews will be acceptable, and is this something that I remember from a previous discussion? One of the challenges I think FedRAMP has was they can't accept risk on behalf of an agency. So is that something that GSA is able, like legally able to do, or is it? And I mean, maybe in terms of just like honing C, is it to work with agencies, authorizing officials to then agree, or is that something that FedRAMP would be in a position to do itself, or would it require legislation? I mean, I think that would, at least for me, as someone who doesn't maybe wouldn't know all of that, have all of that context, clarify exactly what we want to be asking people to do with that third. Because when I heard standards, I think like you said, I thought, oh, you mean you literally want to like change the 300 controls or change, you're not saying that, you're saying, hey, no one gets perfect on these and different agencies look at them differently. That's like that's been a challenge in every company that tried to do this with the government for 40 years. I'm just interested in like, is there a sub part of that FedRAMP could be specifically asked? Like, could we hone that into something that's more actionable to what they have within their sphere of control? Or is it better to say the ask is to go work with agencies, authorizing officials to try to standardize on some of that? Which is, I think, ultimately what everybody probably, I think that's what you're saying, and I just don't know that that's something that speaks to that specifically.
Perhaps, I mean, I don't think, I'll refer to you all the room, but like, I don't think that FedRAMP they can't accept your risk. That's not their job. That's kind of everything moving to the joint authorization from there. So I mean, I don't know that that's even on the table, but.
Is there then maybe something we could call in or define that?
Well, there's always been this idea of like a critical control, because we're not allowed, you couldn't have findings for critical controls, but like, how well is that documented? Can that be something that's expanded to perhaps kind of like build a framework on this? Got a few AOs in the room. I'm curious if y'all have any thoughts. So.
Yeah, I mean, in my mind, I remember, I won't call the particular product out that, you know, when we were in the throes of COVID, many agencies were leveraging a product that when it came to me, I wouldn't allow it because there were too many open critical findings that weren't being addressed. Right. So I get the subjectivity of, you know, the discretion that AOs and agencies have to leverage a product, but I'm thinking, at least in my mind, minimally, I was thinking that this would be addressed. But even when it was, you know, TBD to be worked on, I'd go and pull the package 6 months later, those same findings were still there. And then I'd wait 6 months later, and those same critical findings were still there. So I went and had a meeting with the FedRAMP PMO and said, dude, what's going on, right? Because my agency is suffering because I'm still standing on my hill saying we're not using this. That kind of thing. So from a minimum perspective, what is the price to entry? If you equate it to a car, it has to be roadworthy. The brakes have to work, the lights have to come on, the wipers have to work. And we should define what that means minimally to make it roadworthy, irrespective of the product and agency.
I love that. Thank you.
Yeah.
And that sounds, I think, if you can figure out a way to say that, I think that's actually what you're asking.
Correct. And are we defining that, or are we allowing PMO to define that?
Or are we letting agency?
Correct. I mean, or like, how does that happen? But if that's the end goal, then maybe that's the end goal and we figure out what are the options or paths to get there.
What's again, a concrete next step is what I was thinking, what would we really say, hey, let's send the council to go do that.
Just for everyone's awareness, a few years ago, CISA worked directly with FedRAMP team and GSA. There is a new threat modeling methodology that was developed by DoD that we had adopted at CISA, and we worked with, we pretty much the same thing, just we adopted it for use in federal civilian executive branch. So we've worked with FedRAMP, and that's an option, that's something that we are still considering, and it's a possibility to use one of those threat modeling methodologies to look at the controls, including those organizationally defined parameters and extend that, what were they called? Extensions, control extensions, and try to come up with some type of priority. Because this allows us to look at the actual threats and look at the controls and how they fare against the threats that we are observing in the wild.
So maybe reigniting the work that's already been put into that.
That's an option I want
Right.
everyone to be aware.
That's helpful, and I did forget that, so thank you for bringing that back up.
I just had, Mike from Google. I had two things I wanted to touch on with this one. One is, we're talking about standards, but we're not talking about, schedule or milestones. So I'm curious, maybe we could add something around that where we could actually say, is there a minimum milestone or planning cycle time that we could ask veteran PMO to enforce with agencies? So not only the standards and getting the things approved, but what does the timeline look like for those approvals? And then the second one is, we put sponsoring agencies here. I think it would also be really beneficial if there was a minimum standard across 3 PAOs, to make sure that 3 PAOs are all working with the agencies at the same standardization level. And then that way, maybe it'll build up better trust between agencies and 3 PAOs and their sign-offs, so we can move things faster. So those were the two things I wanted to flag on this.
Thanks, Marcy. Josh made a great point on this, in my opinion, about the 3 PAO like standardization. That to me, that all goes straight back to the FedRAMP documentation and the guidelines that are out there and what's documented. Discrepancies amongst 3 PAOs often come from experience and lessons learned of what works and what didn't, what was acceptable in this instance and what wasn't in another instance. And very, very, very rarely is it documented anywhere. So I completely agree, but would just continue to, I guess, add on and put some Josh's point about the documentation, because I think that's critical the entire process. Yeah.
Bill Honest, I just want to clarify from your first half of that comment, are you suggesting the FedRAMP board would be enforcing timelines and standards, because there's no legislative authority to do that, they can only provide transparency.
Gotcha. So I don't know what the mechanism would be, but like just saying, like, not only do we have a set of controls that are standard, but maybe we actually have a standard timeline for asking agencies from one point to another to institute, like, if you get a package, like, and it's part of this, like, we have this standard timeline that we're going to respond to the CSBA, or this is how long parts of our process take that we're going to try to target and with a timeline. Not saying that it's got to be enforced, like you must respond within 30 days, but like, can we put recommendations out there for agencies, especially the ones on the FedRAMP board?
Personally, that makes me extremely queasy given our current budget situation, government-wide, where pretty much everybody's taking a pretty significant haircut. I think the transparency that the team is providing is excellent. I think that's about the best that we can ask of anybody at this point, but setting arbitrary timelines for small agencies, I mean, props to FDIC for stepping up and being on the FedRAMP board, but like, they are a tiny agency and trying to enforce that sort of standard programs and things. I just don't think that's realistic, and it's just gonna lead to a lot of frustration, disappointment, and congressional hearings that we don't go to.
Just since Matt is not here today, we have to be careful about using the term standards.
Yeah.
Baselines or standard baselines or standardized baselines, but not standards.
Fair enough.
And Jackie?
I was just gonna make a comment. If we have standards for the agency or suggested guidelines, I think we also have to have them for the cloud service providers to respond. This is a two-way street, and there are issues on both sides for meeting timelines. And often the agencies are the ones that are pointed out, when in reality it's a partnership between the two. And there could be any number of issues that delay or accelerate the authorization for a cloud provider over.
Sorry, this is Bill. I'm still queasy on this. Because now you're suggesting that large businesses and small businesses should be competing on the same timelines, which I don't think is realistic. Again, this whole timeline thing is making me very, very uncomfortable.
I would agree with that, actually. The timeline, I mean, I couldn't even tell you a standard timeline because there's so many variables. 3PAO, the cloud provider, the agency, the artifacts, FedRAMP. I mean, there's so many variables. It is hard to put that kind of thing in context over.
Again, I concur with that. I think that we should continue pushing for radical transparency around timelines and have a maximum visibility, identify barriers where things are slowing down. I think all of that is wonderful, and great. What I do not want to see is a deadline. Yet another federal mandate deadline that is unfunded. That is not my world.
Great. Do you think we're ready to take a vote on?
I think we need to tweak the language on C. Like, to me, it's like, I don't know, halfway there of what we all talked about. I think it needs some work before we move forward.
Josh Ruger, project host. Could we tweak the language for A and B to put C in it and add a different third priority? Because I mean, all those are. They're all, it plays into A and B, you know, if you do C. So we said tweak that language, and then I don't know if we add a different priority, if we have only 3. You know, what if we included the one, like the updated guidance for 3POs for the encryption, FIPS modules, training, authorization boundary guidance. If we've been working on draft guidance for 3 years now, that is the standard, but it's still in draft form. I think someone brought it up earlier as well. That's what CSPs need to be successful, which will help the barrier to entry. You know, expedited certification process. If FedRAMP gets a package, and it's a complete package because we have all the guidance that we need to actually implement it. I think updated boundary guidance, updated, you know, cryptographic. You know, what were 3POs testing for the cryptographic launch validation? That varies between 3POs. We've used several different ones. CSPs need to be enabled to serve the government with the guidance. They need to have the guidance available, and there's great stuff on the FedRAMP market, or you know, on the FedRAMP website for everything, but it's lacking in the, you know, not the gray areas, but it's definitely lacking for CSPs, especially small business CSPs that don't have dedicated compliance staff or security staff, and you know, they're paying a bunch of money to a consultant to tell them how to do it. And that costs them more money instead of just being able to have the definitive source from FedRAMP saying this is how this needs to be done. Because every time you hire a new consultant, it's more money. Then you hire 3PO outside of that, that's more money. Then you have to get retested. Now there's red team testing that needs done. Nobody knows, you know, we still don't know what we're supposed to do for that necessarily. Everyone's just taking their best guess at it, basically. So if we want to do these things, you have to enable the CSPs. The CSPs need the guidance from FedRAMP given to them. Because right now it's not there.
Mike from Google, I definitely concur. That's why I wanted to, in C, if we say minimum acceptable standardized baselines for sponsoring agencies, that's why it's also important for the 3GAOs in there. Because if we have that guidance, then things like B, right, we can start to really look at what are the cost reductions. How do we make sure that we're delivering as a CSP a full package in, and it's going to it has the best chance of success with minimal back and forth, which will reduce all of our timelines as well. And then again, to your point, 3PAOs, once they have all that information, they can be providing better guidance to all small businesses as well.
Yeah, I mean, sorry.
Okay.
Josh Ruger project is, yeah, I mean, there's, you know, surprises during assessments because the risk exposure table was, you know, updated. You know, now for 3POs can't validate false positives anymore without the AO signing off on it. And, you know, that's a lot of things CSPs wouldn't know. Small CSPs don't read line by line an instruction document that a 3PO has. You know, they know that, and agencies don't know they're supposed to do it. You gotta talk to your agency, like, hey, we need you to validate this false positive, like, well, I have a 3PO do it. Yeah, I mean, it's just. Federal puts a lot of onus on the agencies and CSPs. And the agency says, go talk to FedRAMP, the FedRAMP says, go ask your agency AO. And CSPs are just stuck in the middle.
Marcy.
Yeah, I think like one of my challenges is that A and B are fairly broad, like all these things we're talking about. I think nest so well under both A and B, they're like subcomponents, so maybe. Do we just take out C altogether and take like. Make and have things that we consider in each A and B, and it be the focus on guidance and documentation and standardization of what, you know, is acceptable from the PMO perspective of, you know, for example, red teaming or. Control interpretation, and then, or, you know, do we also focus on what happens if we create this, whatever the right term is, minimum acceptable threshold for, you know, control implementation or whatever. Maybe those are two lenses that we view A and B through, but perhaps they're not their own standalone. I guess that's my own, as I continue to hear everyone talking, I feel like this list keeps just getting longer because there are subcomponents of A and B.
Lamont, yes, C starts based on exactly what you said. C looks like an outcome of B. Like one of the outcomes.
So I was just gonna suggest changing language because it says evaluate right now, but I would say evaluate and provide guidance. Just to stand, because we're talking about the actual production of documentation, like publishing of that for CSPs and for 3000. And then we still have a minimum risk threshold in there. Do we?
What's the right term? I feel like I'm just mentally doing gymnastics.
I have an offer if it's helpful. In our roadmap, we talk about core security expectations. So if that is a very big, important one, so we can just make it clear for both agencies and CSPs exactly what it means to be FedRAMP authorized. So that's a useful term to pull in.
Bill?
Will my GSA colleagues indulge me and can we see the full original list with votes momentarily since we're talking about shuffling and condensing? I tried on my phone, but I'm technology and that with the mobile website apparently. I apologize.
No worries, she'll work on that. Josh, do you want to go ahead and go?
Josh, going to be my only, and I think that was a good way to do what I was just gonna suggest, but I like that at least one of the recommendations is concrete.
Yeah.
So you know, but if it stays A and B only, then I think we all nod our head and agree, and that there's not much to do there. That's specific. So just as long as we can maintain some of that specificity in the ask. That's all. This seems like a good way to do it.
All right, Kayla, can you go ahead and ask your question or make your comment?
Yes, I was actually going to highlight the risk language as well. So I think that was already brought up and we're gonna move on through that. So I'm good.
Right, and Bronco.
And Bronco says that I'm nitpicking now our language, but evaluate doesn't mean much or then provide guidance. Is the committee going to provide guidance? So just have to pay attention to the action verbs we're using, that what is the outcome? What is the FSCAC actually going to provide? Recommendation? Are we really going to work on the guidance? I mean, probably not.
Passive voice skills.
Yeah, recommend that this be an outcome or a determination. But like, we're not making the action, we're saying someone else should go do this, right?
So recommend maybe that someone needs that kind of a thing.
Yeah, I don't know.
Recommend somebody make a list, although not us. Kind of thing.
We are not doing the work.
Yeah, we're not probably doing that. Right.
All right, Josh Kruger, go ahead.
I guess, you know, if it's already on the FedRAMP roadmap and they're talking about the core, you know, security expectations for agencies, do we even need to include it on this list? If it's already on the roadmap.
I would love to see it moved up in the roadmap. Because if we're coming in and saying, hey, these are two very important priorities of our committee, and this is a significant component of that, perhaps it becomes a higher priority on the roadmap. If we continue to not make duplicative efforts to Bill's point, but just to ensure that stays a focus because it becomes or just another issue that exacerbates these two other things that are happening.
Bill on SEC, obviously, I agree with you. But do we need to have the entire board to concur that, you know, or just call it audible and say, hey, can y'all put that up the top a little bit, or do we need to be like 6 more times to make that priority? I mean, I'm just trying to figure out like, what is the best value for this committee? We're in a room together. I love seeing you all, but what can we actually do with the needle here? And what do you already, I've got it, you got it, then we don't need to say that. That's kind of my point.
So do we deconflict this with the FedRAMP roadmap or
I would strongly recommend, yeah.
the roadmap's huge, which is good.
Do you all need help prioritizing the roadmap, or do you feel?
We have prioritized it. Is this, and so this is, are you guys talking about sort of like, then you would, are these your priorities that you're gonna recommend to us, or are you? Okay, I see. Yeah.
So we don't want to waste your time.
And
Yeah.
this is after the other priorities.
They're all the priority, though, right? They're all of them.
It is, I mean, it is on there, board security expectations is on there. Yeah, and it's certainly like, it's very important in terms of like everything else that we are.
And documentation is on there, right? In terms of updated, like the tips and cues.
Oh, yeah, the knowledge base,
Correct.
and that's an early, that's an earlier one.
I mean,
We also have tips 140 guidance and boundary
Yeah.
guidance, and, you know, a few other things too. I've been struggling a little bit with your question, and it's mostly because, like, we know that there's some short-term things that we need to do, and we've identified those in the roadmap. But I think we also recognize that, like, this is an area where there's continuous reevaluation in this area, and I think there's broad value in you having a discussion around like, what are the next set of things that we should be thinking about and in this area as well? And I'm not sure how to capture that in this conversation.
the next thing doesn't like be on the roadmap.
Yeah.
Mike from Google. So would it be helpful if we got more tactical? It's because we were very strategic in the 2023 priorities, right? Like fix the foundations. So if you're fixing the foundations, like when we start to tell you, like, these are the paint colors, like, is that helpful for you if we got a little bit more tactical on like, these are the major problems we see tactically that CSPs and both large and small business, agencies are fighting. Like, here's the next step. Once you get the foundations fixed, these are the next areas. Make sure they're either part of the fix you're doing now, or the very next thing you start to tackle are these more specific items.
Yeah, possibly, we could come back then and say, well, those are considerations that we're thinking about, or this other consideration is not something we're currently thinking about, please explore that.
Yeah, or even like knowing that we're going to be doing a knowledge base, for example, like the things that from this group's perspective are super critical to get done on them early.
Yep.
Like so that might be a combo of tactical strategy, but yeah, that would be certainly.
Yeah.
Yes.
Because it kind of feels like we're saying like, build a house again, right? And you're like, well, we are building a house. Like, we already know that. So like, would it help be, like, if it's helpful for us to say, like, pick this type of like rating for your window?
Yeah.
That's easier, that would be more directional.
Let's go ahead and go to Bronco.
But also, again, Bronco says, the question is that the roadmap is already very ambitious, right? Do you want us to add more things to your roadmap, or is it a better use of our time and the role to maybe recommend to escalate or expedite certain things on the roadmap that this committee considers to be of higher priority?
And carrying on to that, are there things that you all could upload back to the committee and say, please figure this out amongst yourselves, so that we don't have to think about it, that brings your bandwidth and it puts us onto actual tangible tasks.
Josh,
I was somewhat following up on those 2 points, like where I think Josh Compier, where that could be helpful for FedRAMP helping us do that, be more tactical. The recommendation is like, look at what's next on your roadmap and then help us break that down into I'm used to like when you build complicated software, you break things into OKRs and then it comes down to a specific set of outcomes. We'll know that gets fixed when there's metrics behind it and stuff. The conversations we've had over the last year have been kind of a level or two up from that. And I think we are all in violent agreement with your roadmap. It's hard to say that's the roadmap, because there's so much on it. It's like, you know, maybe if there's one of the things we could say, well, that got fixed, but I think some of this pretty foundational stuff. Helping us see where you're breaking that down and then looking at specific problems you're trying to solve and say that that's where maybe this could be helpful and it would be helpful for us to then know, let's spend an hour or two talking through one of these things. And if you don't have we'll know that to be done, that metric down. Maybe that's something that could help, but just how far in the weeds you need us to get, but I think everybody's in agreement, we probably need to take it down. That's my thoughts.
Oh, no, she's still not. Okay, Kayla, let's go to you next.
Yes, Kayla, HackerOne. I just wanted to also echo that I think it's important that even if maybe we are touching on something that's already on the roadmap, that, you know, our collective voice, our experiences, the reasons why we're all here, can add, you know, you're saying color to the walls. It's an important perspective, and story that we're bringing. And I think that even if it's on the roadmap, it doesn't mean that we should discount it, our voice being important to the development of that roadmap priority. So I would just caution against us saying we don't want to do something that's on the roadmap because we believe will be duplicative if we might not be, based on the actual goal and the priority. I just wanted to throw that out there.
Great. So, Kayla, that was a great way to kind of underscore the discussion. If nobody objects, I think we're ready to take a vote. I'd like to make a motion that this committee to work on the priorities of A, identifying challenges and propose solutions around the barrier to entry for CSPs with a focus on small businesses, 3 PAOs, small and large agencies, to include the number 14 or sub A underneath that. Evaluate and provide guidance, a minimum risk threshold / minimum acceptability standardized baselines for sponsoring agencies and 3 PAOs. And then uppercase B, consider ways to expedite the certification process, explore agile authorizations and other potential cost reductions, both labor and financial. And again, the same subcat or lowercase a, evaluate and provide guidance for a minimum risk threshold, minimum acceptability standardized baselines for sponsoring agencies and 3 PAOs as our next initiative. Do I have a second? Seconded by Lamont.
I will now go ahead and go through the roll call. And if you could please just go ahead and let me know how you vote. Daniel's not here. Michael via circuit.
Aye.
Thank you. Carlton Harris.
Aye.
Kayla Underkoffler.
Aye.
Josh Kruger.
Aye.
Marcy Volmet. You can also abstain.
I'm gonna abstain. Thank you.
Bronco Bogan. Matt is not here, neither is Bo. Noman.
Aye.
Jackie Snelfer.
Stain.
Bill Hunt.
Nay.
And Josh Goen.
Also staying.
Okay, it looks like we do have approval to go forward with these two priorities. So the motion was approved. Since it's 1:17 now, we can discuss we can discuss ways that we can work on these priorities as our next topic item.
So exciting and interesting, the mix of votes, but, the fact that we have chosen these two priorities. I'm personally thrilled that we can focus in on a small number and actually give the committee's attention to this small number of priorities. I want to thank you all for the deliberation and the commitment to the work we've accomplished so far today. As Michelle said, we still have some time, so we can perhaps address the topic of how we want to work on these priorities. We have two stated priorities. I think it makes sense to bring up the concept of subcommittees as an option to work on these. Now, there's a benefit to breaking into smaller groups to do this work, including the ability to dive deeper into each of the priorities respectively, collaborate more, and potentially meet more frequently and more easily with fewer calendars to compete with. And remember that the full committee will still have the opportunity to review and approve subcommittees' work and recommendations, so that everyone will still be included on the final deliverable. Personally, I've worked on subcommittee myself with great success. When I was at DHS, I was involved with the National Security Telecommunications Advisory Committee, which was not a FSCAC, but it is a presidential advisory committee. And we utilized industry executive subcommittee to get a lot of work done on behalf of the FSCAC. I don't know today if they still use that same structure, but I still read the reports that the FSCAC produces, and it's a great model. So I want to open up discussion to what you, the other members, think about breaking into smaller groups to work on these priorities. Thoughts, please, Bill.
Respectfully, I don't like the idea. Quite frankly, this is a very small board. We only have two priorities. We have a whole year to work on them. I don't see the need for the acceleration that you're talking about necessarily. And moreover, we have some very, very smart voices at the table here. I would just be very disappointed if we didn't have all those voices included in the discussion. I can't think of a single topic we've worked on where somebody at this table didn't have something to say and brought something valuable to discussion. I wouldn't want to lose that, especially since we're such a small, tight-knit group. That's just my personal opinion, but I do appreciate the subcommittee methodology, used it many times in the past, but we just have such a narrower scope, a narrow focus, and a narrow number of voices in the room. I would hate to lose any of that personally. Thank you.
I would agree with that. There's also only one 3PO. And I feel like it's an opinion that is not mine, but of the group is important and valuable and adds certain particular context to the discussions, and that would be lost in the subcommittee method.
Thank you.
Again, I agree. I don't want to completely dismiss the idea of subcommittees later. If we want to work on guidance and deep dive into specific topics, but I think at this point, we're better off with the work executive.
No, Michael.
I also agree. I did have a question. Is there capability for us to survey like the broader industry from the FSCAC level? Like, would we be able to put a survey out to like industry leaders on things that related to these topics?
That is a question I think that we may have to go back to our FSCAC attorneys on, because there is some issues around collecting information because of the Paperwork Reduction Act. We don't want to violate that, of course.
Yeah.
But that is something that we can check with our FSCAC attorneys.
Okay,
on.
yeah, because I'm just like on these specifically, it would be also kind of hear what's going on in the field and then figure out what we could recommend.
And we may be able to partner with the non-government group to collect some information too.
Sure.
Bill.
Yeah, no, Bill, see, to that end, no, I was gonna say there's two options that we have on the table there. Number one, we can use the public comment forum that we already have established in the backup, so like do the same. Like public comments, so we do that. And as you pointed out, right, there's a couple of organizations that GSA works with very regularly that bridge the private-public partnership. Just named two, by academics are many good ones that they use regularly around here. I've been on many things with CIO council, but it's just a flag that we do have opportunities, but I know all GSA legal is as well. So
The veteran annual survey is out. Could we potentially take feedback that's submitted through that avenue to consider in lieu of doing a new survey?
Bill, I'm getting a perhaps not,
Can you repeat it?
Yeah, so the question was around, like, could we do a public survey to identify from stakeholders like key points for 1 and 2? Is there an option for the veteran annual survey about? Is it possible that we could receive those results and incorporate that feedback into our considerations versus creating a new survey? We can take as a maybe takeaway.
Unfortunately, I'm new to the PMO and I have not done one of these before, so I don't exactly know an answer, but we can investigate this and get back to
Yeah,
you.
there are women you get back.
Yeah, thanks.
I just wanted to add, the reason I asked that question is that would kind of sway if we need a like, if we come back with like 20 different things that industry is asking us to go fix, like, it would be easier in subcommittee, I think, but if not, like, we could do it in this room, for sure.
yeah, I will say that, the surveys would have to be made public, if they are part of the FSCAC. So just a reminder that could provide some challenging, issues, but that's something we can definitely explore. It does sound like that we aren't interested in breaking into subcommittees, which is totally good. But I did want to solicit information on what you would like to see in your next meeting. Specifically, is there any information that you need and to work on these 2 topics that you would need to get briefings on or anything like that before we can really start working? Bill, go ahead.
I assume we're going the same place, which is, a lot of these we need to solicit that information from the community. That's the point of the survey, I think is well taken. To really start moving, on number 1 particularly, we really need to, query what people are actually struggling with. I'm sure the veteran team has a lot of data on that, they could share with us already, but I feel like, before we can head into, solutioning, we need to. For the person.
I was gonna second that, and then also, knowing how progress is being made on current initiatives, current priorities, so we could see like where are we and where do we want to go.
Okay.
So,
And Kayla, go ahead.
Yeah, Kayla, HackerOne. I do think it would be nice to get information from all these stakeholders in A, as far as like what does the entry process actually look like for 3PAOs, for small and large agencies. I have the idea for CSPs because that's the world I'm in, but that would be helpful for me to understand. So to hear that feedback from those stakeholders, what does the entry process look like for them? So if we could get that type of clarification, that would be awesome.
All right, Kayla, I know that you were in our meeting, one of our meetings previously, that we had a couple of 3POs that did provide kind of it was more informal Q&A type thing where they came in and spoke about their experiences with FedRAMP. Would something like that be helpful? If we could find CSPs to have an open and frank conversation with this guy?
Yes. Yes, I'd say 3PAOs and small and large agencies from my perspective, and then of course maybe CSPs for some of the other perspectives in the room that would like to hear that. So maybe like a small group from all these. I know that's kind of what we are as this committee, a small group from all these stakeholders. But yes, hearing that from those sources would be great. Informal Q&A would be awesome. Small presentation would be awesome. However, works best for the committee and the flow of the process, but.
Thanks, Kiva. I wasn't paying attention who was first, so I'll go for one of the Joshes. Let's go for Josh Kruger.
Yeah, so GSA is a listserv for the FedRAMP CSP community that, they talk on now, right? And then I host monthly a meeting for anyone that wants to join it for just CSPs, usually about 35, 40 different CSPs on where we talk about the current issues, like new emergency directive or something dropped, we fill in a template, how we fill it out, just general CSP questions. We have it once monthly. But we could, socialize around to that group as well. To see if, we'd be willing to join. But we have, there's quite a few people, quite a few CSPs on it now. Josh Kruger, project host. Sorry. But yeah, I mean, we could, invite the members of this to that meeting, next meeting, people come prepared if we wanted. And see how it goes.
Thanks, Josh. How about the other Josh?
Sure. Thank you. Josh Cohn, I'll go back to the FedRAMP folks. Perhaps I would ask a specific question, which is in the next 6 months, I know your roadmap's very large, but what are the 2 things you as the PMO are hoping to get done in the next 6 months? And then on that roadmap, to the earlier question of break it down into its subcomponents, what are you actually going to do, and what metrics are used to determine its success? I think it'd be interesting for us to hear. I know we know of the roadmap, I know that's very high level, but if we're gonna start eating the elephant one bite at a time, like what part of the elephant are you biting next? And maybe just the next 2. And then what are the specific metrics that you'll know whether that was or wasn't successful? Because I think that's where we would be very valuable, maybe. And to Bill's point, especially all of us, because there is kind of a subsection of a lot of those different players here. That might be a good use of an upcoming meeting. And then any, like, again, not to use a software development term, but like user-centered design type user experience discovery is what I'm hearing a lot of everybody wanting, which I think uses surveys, but does a little bit more than surveys. It's done really well. Usually have a pretty, again, if it's done well, pretty awesome readout that would answer a lot of those questions. More than just a survey, like what are specific pain points? I mean, people that are really good at that. And there's a lot of that in the government. I mean, I work for an office that does a lot of that, but like, I'm sure with the GSA, there's gotta be a user researcher around. It's maybe to the point of not just having a presentation, which I think we've had, and I'm not saying that for the new members, that might not be really good for the next shorter meetings, but I think like for those of us that have been on it, like I think we get what the common problems are, digging into some of those problems and having like real research on the people that are, experienced researching people that would also be something I'd be interested in seeing if you guys are interested in, and that would be a great topic, I think, to bring back to this. Yeah.
Thanks. Michael, go ahead.
Yeah, Mike from Google. The one thing that I'd like to see, and this might be maybe not the next meeting, but maybe in the next 2 meetings, is the FedRAMP board process plan. Like, how is that actually going to roll out? What does it look like in terms of authorizations? Like all of the things are related around that. And also like things that are in the queue right now. How are we going to actually make sure that they're getting through this new board? How are they getting reassigned? How's that work looking? It's a little bit more tactical, but I think we caused a problem and a little bit of a trust issue with the JAB dissolution, and we need to make sure that we're correcting for that.
Great. Go ahead.
Yeah. What I would like to request is in one of the early FSCAC meetings, we had a FedRAMP brief us on the process, but things have changed. Now we have a new board. So, and obviously new members. So well, it's no longer a refresher. We really need another process, pretty detailed end-to-end process from the very start point when an agency needs a cloud offering and to all the way to FedRAMP authorization and back to. You could walk us through the process again. I'm sure there'll be a lot of questions, and I think that goes back to what Michael was also proposing. Then there will be specific questions on the queues at each of the individual steps. I think we should start with that refresher.
And Marcy.
Agreed, because I think there's like some confusion, like the FedRAMP board isn't doing authorization, so like that's all effectively gone, so they're doing guidance. So again, like just to echo that, I think a new baseline of in terms of this is the structure would be helpful in terms of the overall FedRAMP process. As well as like tactical steps and regular updates on like the first 2 to 3 initiatives. I think that'll be really important to continue tracking. So if we need to tailor our priorities and recommendations, we can do that. And then I have an open question for FedRAMP/OMB. When is the memo not going to be in draft? We're taking all of these actions based on a draft memo, and I find that to be interesting.
So it'd be on the line.
Is like, is there, what is the process for finalizing an OMB memo? Like, what's the timeline?
I don't, unfortunately, I don't think that
Okay.
we will have an answer to that, but it is something that we can ask for OMB to provide us an update for our
That'd
next,
be
meeting.
Anecdotally, 6 to 24.
I'm sorry, 36. I just got told that.
Oh, that's it, right, place.
All right, Bill, did you have anything else?
Just carrying this and trying to be very, very tactical about like next steps and moving ahead here. So, it sounds like we are in congrats on a couple of things. An update from the veteran team, put them on the spot again and just tell us how it works, what we're doing and where we're going. I think the committee is desperate for an update from OMB. And not the sort of update we had last time where they just asked us questions the whole time, but actually a tangible update on where they're at in the process, what they're thinking about, where things are going. I know that OMB hates to be getting ahead of itself and being pre-decisional. I know you're listening. So we don't expect you to get ahead of your GC, but we would like to hear sort of like where things are at least for this board's position on where we're going and some sort of an estimate that can be provided. I think that seems like reasonable things to do in the next meeting, perhaps to your original point. The other half of this that we're talking about surveys and the user research piece of it. This board isn't actually designed operationally, I think necessarily to do user research. So it seems like maybe we should work offline a little bit through the course of the next like meeting or so that we can figure out how we're going to tactically solve that from a legal and process perspective. And then that'll equip us with knowledge and information that we can start tackling these. I just feel like the next meeting, we probably won't be able to have that sort of research done and actually be able to dive into at least number one, or even necessarily number 6 there, that quickly without having that research done. So I would propose that maybe we look at a recap for the next meeting, so it's ready for summer anyway. And then maybe start looking at, and between now and then, figure out tactically what we can do to actually do this user research that we're discussing from the actual perspective. That would be my semi-proposal.
Fantastic. I did also want to ask the board whether we would want to do an in-person meeting or a virtual meeting for our next meeting. I will remind you, it is difficult to get space in the GSA building, so it takes about 3 months to get a conference room, unfortunately. So virtual, we would be able to schedule a virtual meeting to have that refresh much quicker than an in-person meeting. So, Marcy, do you have?
I would propose that the next session that's focused on like info gathering, would be virtual, and then if we're coming together to hone in on recommendations on the top priorities, that be in person, so perhaps the subsequent meeting.
Fantastic. Everybody else in agreement of that? Okay, awesome.
So Dave raised a hand in the back about something that was being discussed.
You know, as we're working to prepare a survey for program stakeholders, it would be really helpful to get some recommendations from this group around like some of the questions that we should be asking in that survey. So as you're thinking through, you know, how to do more outreach to stakeholders, we would appreciate any thoughts around questions for future survey.
Thank you.
What's the best process way for us to submit that?
Yeah, just send them all to FSCAC, at gsa.gov, and we will definitely make sure that they are given that information.
Thanks.
So it sounds like we do have plans moving forward. So let's go ahead and move to our final topic in the agenda today. Larry, do you have any closing remarks you'd like to make?
Oh, yeah, I'd like to thank you all again for being here, for your valuable input into determining the direction that this committee should take. I think our discussion today has been productive. I look forward to continuing these discussions and working with everyone on these priorities to help improve the process for secure adoption of cloud computing products and services in the federal government. Michelle, back to you.
Okay, thank you. And thank you all again for joining today. With that, I will go ahead and adjourn the meeting at this time. And thank you.